Welcome to the October magazine. I'm Chris, your host of this wonderful podcast. And unfortunately, I am sick. It's every podcaster's nightmare. The voice is nasal, the throat hurts. Honestly, a broken leg would be far more pleasant, and that's why today's episode won't be quite as long. In the news, I'll be talking about Sudden Disaster 2, the Quintessential Cookout, the cancellation of the December LAN, and the announcement of a new DLC. In the franchise news, I'll briefly touch on the fact that we've received more info on the new roguelite RTS game mode in Age of Empires IV, The Crucible, and that the second and possibly final DLC for Age of Mythology has been released. As for game news, I'll skip that this time to save my voice, so we'll head straight into podcast news and then look at the tournament outlook for October 2025. I sincerely hope you'll enjoy this show and consider supporting this podcast on Patreon. News. Sudden Disaster 2 was the highlight of September, and for good reason. In the Sudden Death game mode, we experienced Age of Empires 2 in a whole new way. Much more aggressive, much more creative, with tons of high-risk, high-reward strategies. The tournament, hosted by John Slow and T West, was an absolute success. Not only were the sets nearly all entertaining, no matter who was playing, but the viewer numbers surely exceeded the expectations for an A-tier event. In the final, Frick and Andy faced off against Lewis, but before we get to that, I just want to casually mention the path Lewis had to take to even reach the finals. His opponents, in order: Survivalist, Valas, Bals, Sebastian, Hart, and then finally Frick and Andy in the final. From at least the third round onward, we're talking about potential tournament favorites. Andy's road, at least judging by the names, seemed somewhat easier. No Zombie, Stone Please, the young star Neos, the ultra-aggressive Duduju, Sora Kuma, and then Lewis in the final. None of the series between Lewis and Andy ended in a sweep, and that was true for most of the matches in general. In the round of 32, there was only one single sweep, Viles vs. Dark, and after that only Hart swept Mr. Yo and Duduju swept Antagonist. All of this leads me to wonder whether or other mixed map tournaments shouldn't also introduce a sudden death category. Well, that's probably just wishful thinking on my part, so let's move straight to the final between Andy and Lewis. While Andy is a proven top player, often ranked somewhat in the world's top 10, and now more than ever thanks to his qualification for the Ling Yuan Cup in China, Lewis is a newcomer who's been making waves over the past year. He's somewhat considered to be a mini-Hera and seemingly standing on the brink of a major breakthrough. Reaching the final of this tournament is undoubtedly his biggest achievement so far, and the question was, which of these two players would come out on top? The matchup looked almost perfectly 50-50 in my opinion, especially in Sudden Death mode. But the finals started in a very unusual way for this tournament. On the least Sudden Death-like map, Triple Tunnel, with Andy as Persians and Lewis as Japanese. The civilization picks might seem odd for a map that's basically, Black Forest with 3 passages, but since both players had a lake to fish boom in, the choices did make sense. Andy opened with a sneaky villager and docked Lewis's lake to contest his fish, but Lewis spotted it in time, so the plan didn't really work out. From there, the game developed as expected into a late-game slugfest, with heavy fighting in the central tunnel. In the end, Lewis came out on top, since the Japanese simply have the stronger matchup here, especially with trash units and towers. So for me, the most boring game was already out of the way right at the start. Game 2 was played on Skuzuza. Andy picked the Jurchens, while Lewis went with the Khmer. Skuzuza is a very open map, where players spawn close together in the center, which itself is full of zebras and ostriches. Given this setup, everyone probably expected full scout play from both sides, but Andy actually went for a fast castle with walls on this probably unwallable map. Once in Castle Age, Andy went nearly all in with fire lancers and rocket carts. I say nearly, because he still kept enough food income to keep producing villages, all without ever building a single farm. Lewis tried to defend at home with mangonels while launching counterattacks with knights and especially cav archers, but in the end, the sheer pressure and sheer number of rocket carts from Andy were just too much for Lewis to handle. That evened the score. It was 1-1. Game 3 was played on Hideout. Lewis picked the Way, while Andy went with the Khitan. Andy thought, hey, that worked well last time, so he went for another fast castle. Lewis, on the other hand, invested more into economy and prepared for an attack. Andy struck again with rocket carts and fire lancers, this time adding step lancers into the mix. And Lewis didn't have cav archers like in the previous game, since he's playing as the Way, but the Xianbei gave him a very effective counterattack tool. They crippled Andy's economy for several minutes, forcing Andy to pause his push and deal with them using his step lancers. While in the second game, Lewis never really managed to counterattack successfully. This time around, his Xianbei raiders caused so much trouble that Andy's push was kind of put to a halt. In the end, Lewis's economic lead was simply too large and Andy's attack too weakened. After fending off one last big wave of Andy's attack, Lewis forced the GG, going up 2-1. The next map was Chicken Arena. Lewis picked the Burgundians, while Andy chose the Portuguese. From the Burgundians, you'd expect a strong economy with early techs and light cavalry to grab some relics. Portuguese, on the other hand, can go fast castle into a castle drop, fast castle into monks, or even fast imperial with traps and fetorias, which is especially powerful in sudden death. Andy went for a fast castle into a defensive castle with monks after all, while Lewis played the expected monk and light cav style with Burgundians. And he then brought out organ guns and monks, securing map control. Lewis countered with a clever fast imp behind defensive castle to push Andy back, which worked for a while thanks to his large monk count in particular. But Andy wasn't far behind to the Imperial Age, and he dropped a Feitoria to boost his economy. What followed was the inevitable monk war. Lewis had more monks and earlier traps, but the fight for the middle turned out surprisingly even. Thanks to his stronger economy, Andy was able to secure and hold the map control, however. After just under 40 minutes, Lewis tapped out and Andy tied the series once again. Game 5 was in Wellsprings, the map with the long aqueduct connecting the two wall-starting bases. At the bottom of the aqueduct, each base has 30,000 fish, but since the aqueduct can be destroyed, along with the fish under it, timing and decision-making are critical on this map. Andy picked Italians, Lewis went with the Gujaras. Both went fast castle, though of course the Italians are a bit quicker. Andy leaned on Genoese crossbowmen, while Lewis opted for light cav and monks. An interesting choice, since Genoese crossbows are supposed to counter that. But Lewis managed to leverage his monks well enough to push Andy back for now. Both then minimized their risks and clicked up to the Imperial Age. Just before that, Andy decided to destroy the aqueduct, though it didn't really change much because he didn't make use of that timing. In Imperial, Andy launched a push with a forward castle, Genoese crossbows, and trebuchets. Lewis had no proper defense, not even 5 relics could save him that he were collecting while Andy was on his way to the Imperial Age. In a last desperate move, he tried to snipe Andy's TCs with trebuchets, but Andy spotted it right away and stopped it immediately. Lewis resigned and Andy took the lead for the first time in the set. Game 6 was on Ring of Reeds, with Lewis as Bengalis and Andy as Koreans. Andy's opening as Koreans was to wall Lewis out of the center while pressuring from the outside with men-at-arms. Lewis went for a fast castle but couldn't really leave his base. The real trouble began when he dropped a castle at the walls in front of his base to break out toward the middle again. Once this castle was up, he started producing Rathas. From there, it was just a slow, steady push by Lewis that Andy couldn't stop. That meant we got the dream final I'd been hoping for, the deciding game on my favorite map of the whole tournament, Canberra. Canberra plays like Hideout in that both players start walled, but here they're connected by a river. The middle is full of fish that's almost always contested, and the river splits the map into two sides, linked by shallow crossings. Water control is absolutely key. Lewis went with Byzantines, dangerous because of their fast imperial timing, while Andy chose Armenians, strong for monks and water control. Andy indeed took control of water, and thus the valuable fish and access to Lewis's base via the river. Lewis went for a fast castle, which didn't pay off initially. Andy gathered relics in Castle Age, won the Monk War, and controlled the middle. Both headed toward Imperial Age, but Lewis invested into stone and reclaimed the center with one, then two castles. True to the tone of the previous games, very much respecting each other, both players played more cautiously than usual for this tournament. But just before Imperial, Lewis took a risk. He built a transport ship and petards. Andy smelled something was up and tried to prepare. And then a chain of events unfolded, one that I cannot really retell you myself because of my cracked voice, so I will let T90 narrate instead. Here's the clip from his cast of the Grand Finals.
Guys, the transport's still there and the petards are still there. If Lewis can wait for, like, the opportune time, when it gets really messy, maybe there's a chance. Oh, but Andy's walling, which is so smart because it will get messy and you're not going to be paying attention all the time. So he's walling that up. Oh, and there go the petards. Lewis thinks he's going to die. There goes Lewis. There he goes. Lewis's hopes and dreams are in this transport ship. His hopes and dreams are being blocked. He is being... Oh! Well, he's out. And he's gonna... Oh, he's back in! Get faked, freaking Andy! Get faked! Get faked! Get faked! Get faked! Get faked! Get the... No, there's a wall! Oh, no! Oh, no! That would have been amazing! He doesn't have enough. He doesn't have enough. I mean, the distraction's probably worth it, though. He hits the TC. He doesn't have enough. Wow. Guys, that gives him an opportunity to roll through and use the trebs to finish it off. It's not finished yet. Castles and Drawmans and micro is needed. Panic for Andy. Panic for Andy. He has to hit those trebs. He has to stop those trebs. He's going to drop a church. Here comes Lewis. Grand final. Game 7. Lewis is going for the TC. His Drawman will be converted, so he deletes it. He's bringing the trebs. Lewis is... Andy is bringing the Vils. This could be an epic finish. Lewis, go. Can he range it? There's not enough repairs for 4 trebs. There's not enough repairs for 4 trebs. They just have to get into the spot. He's gonna win. He's gonna win. He's gonna win it. He will win it. It's not winnable for Andy. I'm pretty certain. Repairs. Repairs. He does it. Lewis wins in the most epic way possible. He was so dead here, guys. He was so dead, but he remembered the game mode. And he remembered he had to send everything. Literally everything. He brought his Vils. He had the transport. He had the petards. What a finish. Trebs and a dream, and Lewis wins the final. And this is going to go down as probably one of the best wins he's ever had, man. It has to be, right? He's had such a short career. We hope he continues to fight, continues to play like this in other tournaments. But oh my goodness, are you not entertained? That is sudden death.
That was a fitting conclusion to Sudden Disaster, an absolutely fantastic tournament, and one I definitely want to see more of. Quintessential Cookout. I only have a short note on Quintessential Cookout because I didn't follow the tournament at all during my vacation, and to be honest, I didn't really feel motivated to catch up on it afterwards either. The event was hosted by GL, had a prize pool of $2,500, and was won by Viper. I did ask my community if anyone could tell me something about the tournament that was noteworthy, and it turned out that most people hadn't even heard of it. That might be because only Memb and Ornlu uploaded the event on YouTube, and even then, Memb just tucked the finals into a Rage Forest video. Like, there was a Rage Forest game before it and after it, and his editor or himself didn't even bother to cut that away, even though the title of the video was only the finals of Quintessential Cookout. So it doesn't seem like the tournament carried much weight after all. At least I heard Memb recommend the Viper vs. Yo set, and I'll just pass that recommendation on to you unverified. Then there's also the news about the cancellation of the December LAN event. At the end of September, Nilly announced that the LAN planned for December in Germany had been cancelled. The reasons are unknown, but the result is that the prize pool for the upcoming Thalassocracy Cup in November has been increased by $5,000 to a total of $25,000, which is a significant boost. Apparently, there will also be an S-tier online tournament instead of the LAN, though we'll only get more details on that soon. The most realistic explanation I can come up with is that GL had originally planned the LAN, I'm assuming that GL is the host, but due to logistical or organizational issues, or maybe sponsoring, it couldn't go ahead, so they switched to online. That would explain why part of the designated prize pool is moving to a different tournament, because they probably planned with $5,000 for hotels or other equipment that they now don't have to use. If GL has pulled out entirely, though, if they ever were involved, I could imagine Memb stepping in. He recently said he wasn't planning to attend the German LAN anyway because he wanted to stay with his family. And if there's one thing everybody knows about Memb is that he has two families. His real family, of course, and his lover boys. Maybe he'll find a way to juggle both. Also, the 3-week tournament structure, 2 weeks of qualifiers and 1 week of main event, definitely has Memb's fingerprints on it. But that's all just speculation on my part, and I'm very curious to see who actually ends up running the tournament. My bet is still on GL. On September 17th, a new single-player DLC was announced, Chronicles Alexander the Great, with a release date of October 14th, 2025. The DLC was developed by the Capture Age team, who are a development partner of World's Edge, and it continues the Chronicles series that began with the first DLC set in ancient Greece, released in November 2024. This new DLC includes a long campaign with 18 scenarios and introduces 3 new civilizations: the Macedonians, the Thracians, and the Puru, along with new architectural sets. If it's anywhere near as good as the first Chronicles DLC, the missions should be a lot of fun to play. Unlike Battle for Greece, where all 3 Greek civilizations played an equal role, this campaign focuses almost entirely on Alexander the Great and the Macedonians, with only 2 scenarios as exceptions. Personally, I'm a huge fan of the first Chronicles DLC, so I'm very excited to dive into Alexander's story. The very only minor criticism I have is actually the setting. I'm not a huge fan of having antiquity as a setting for Age of Empires 2 campaigns, even though it was very nicely done. I'd favor a campaign in the Middle Ages with this amount of effort put into them. But then again, antiquity is much richer in history than most of what has happened in the Middle Ages. Since there were a few recent layoffs at Capture Age in key positions, we can probably assume that there won't be any further Chronicles DLCs for now. By the time of the next magazine, I'll most likely have played this one already, so I should be able to share more impressions then. Franchise news. Yesterday, the new DLC for Age of Mythology was released, Heavenly Spear, which explores Japanese mythology. In the last magazine, I already talked a bit about the mythological units, and now that the DLC is out, I can turn my attention to the campaign. That reminded me, though, that I had never actually finished the last mission of the Chinese campaign in Age of Mythology, something I quickly caught up on during my vacation. While you can already play the new DLC, at the time of the recording of this episode, it hasn't been released yet for me personally, so I'll only be able to start playing in the evening of today, and I'll only be able to tell you in the next magazine whether it's any good. What I can tease for now is that there's a shrine that lets you turn trees into cherry blossom trees to gain favor, which means there's a real chance I'll ignore the missions for a while just to make the map prettier. Coming up in November, we'll also get the new DLC for Age of Empires IV, which I mentioned in the last magazine. In the meantime, more details have been shared about the Crucible, the new single-player RTS roguelite game mode in Age of Empires IV. Here's how it works. You fight off waves of enemies and ideally try to survive up to 45 minutes. There will be 4 missions to choose from. Contested Coastline, where you'll be fighting pirates on a Mediterranean map. Daimyo Dynamics, where you'll be defending yourself against 3 Japanese clans. Forest Lords, battling bandits of the Holy Roman Empire. And, pardon the pun, I guess, Watch Your Step. You'll be holding out against mounted hordes of Mongols. You can freely choose your civilization on all these missions, as well as the difficulty level, of which there are 8 in total. The match starts with a wonder, which must be defended at all costs, so essentially it's a wonder defense mode. According to the description, the enemy waves won't always be the same. Alongside standard waves, there will also be boss waves. During the game, you can earn bonuses called boons, which might give extra resources or powerful effects, like making your army invincible for a short time. This is where the roguelite aspect comes in, since the available boons are random, making each run different. But that's not all. While defending the Wonder is the main objective, you can also tackle side missions scattered across the map. For example, freeing powerful champions who then join your army. After 25 minutes, you'll earn bronze rank, after 35 minutes silver, and after the full 45 minutes, you'll get a gold rank plus the option to enter an endless mode to keep playing as long as you can. Since it's a roguelite, not a roguelike, there are also persistent upgrades that carry over between runs, like faster production speed, extra scouts, or starting buildings already constructed. Honestly, as someone who doesn't normally play Age of Empires IV but just watches the competitive scene, I'm actually tempted to reinstall it and give this mode a try. But before that, I first need to play through the new Age of Mythology campaign and the new Age of Empires II campaign. This fall is surely packed with single-player content across the whole franchise. Podcast news. Yes, podcast news, no game news. I won't be covering them today, simply to save my voice. Just a quick note, the Steam Autumn Sale has just started, and at least for me, about half of the games on my wish lists are heavily discounted right now. That also applies to the Age of Empires franchise though, and Age of Mythology, so if you've been meaning to pick up a DLC or try out another title, now's probably a good time. Now, onto the podcast news. First and foremost, the release rhythm of the podcast is going to change a bit, unfortunately. I'll have less time in the future to research and record episodes, so for now I'm giving up on the weekly rhythm. Instead, I'll publish an episode whenever I can. Every 2 weeks should definitely be doable, which means the magazine episodes and Civilization episodes will still come out regularly. The reason is simply that I'm taking care of my father. I've been doing this for the past couple of years, but his condition has worsened, so I need to spend more time with him. And I don't want to feel constant time pressure because of the podcast, which is, after all, just a hobby project. If I tried to stick to a weekly rhythm, I couldn't maintain the quality of the episodes anymore, and that's definitely not something I'm willing to compromise on. I also want to thank you all for your messages and great topic suggestions after the last magazine. Thomas, Sandro, Bernardo, and Theo wrote me some really exciting ideas via email at ageofcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to do the same, feel free to do so at ageofcast@gmail.com. A few of you also sent me research material for my upcoming episodes on the playstyles of pro players. Thanks especially to Fomer May and Dan for that. I've already been looking through it. In fact, I used my sick days productively for exactly this, and your material has been really insightful. There's also been a couple of other messages, but since my voice is really weird and actually my throat is starting to hurt again, I already had to take a couple of breaks, even though we're just 25 minutes into this podcast. I'll be postponing those messages to the next magazine and probably answer in more detail then. I apologize very much for my voice, but can't do much about it now. So now you know the situation. Please have a bit of patience with new episodes in the near future. After this one, I'd love to hear from you about which civilization I should be covering next. So far, we have looked at the Aztecs, the Huns, and the Romans. So which civilization should be the fourth one to do an episode on? And most importantly, tell me, why do you think it won't see many changes anymore? Let me know by email or on Discord, because I'm trying to cover those civilizations first that probably won't change for a while. That's going to do it for the podcast news, and now we'll take a look at Tournament Outlook for October 2025. Masters of Hyper Random 3 is already underway and will keep us entertained until October 19th, just right before the Ling Yuan Cup begins. The tournament has a prize pool of $10,000 and has been very entertaining so far. Strictly speaking, the tournament is only really starting now, since up to this point it's only been the qualifiers. The player lineup, Tato, Vilesa, Frickin' Andy, and Vinch, qualified through their placements in the first two editions, and ACCM, Leary, Viper, and Yo received direct invitations. From the recently finished qualifiers, Kapoch, Doubt, Lewis, MBL, Mihai, Sito, Sorakuma, and Vivi secure their spots. I watched most of the qualifier finals and found them to be very entertaining. The format begins with a group stage featuring two groups, followed by playoffs. The tournament concludes on October 19th, just in time for the Ling Yuan Cup. And this Ling Yuan Cup is a $45,000 LAN event in Beijing, China, running from October 22nd to 26th. The event is named after the organizers, the Chinese team Ling Yuan, which includes 2 of the 10 participants, Yo and Vivi. The invited players are Yo, Hera, Leary, and Viper. ACCM, Hart, Nikov, Frickin' Andy, and Sebastian qualified through international qualifiers, while Vivi secured a spot via the Chinese mainland qualifier. It is set to be 5 packed and exciting days. The first place will take home $9,450 in prize pool. Yo and Vivi will have the chance to prove themselves in front of their home crowd, and Microsoft will get to see how well they can strengthen their foothold in the Chinese competitive scene. For viewers, we won't get much of the LAN atmosphere, since we'll just receive a clean feed of the games, which will then be commentated by your casters of choice. The format is a 9-villager start, and 4 of the 5 days are a Swiss system group stage. Only the final day is a short playoff bracket with semifinals and a final. No third place match, which I really appreciate, and probably everyone does. The map pool is diverse and designed to suit different playstyles, and 4 of the 10 maps were created specifically for this event and already featured in the qualifiers. Comir is an aggressive water map. Lookout is where players start with outposts in a faraway barracks. Not Nomad is actually Nomad, but with randomly placed town center, so no nomadic start. And Seychelles is kind of reminiscent of Northern Isles, but the islands are connected by 2 long crossings, so kind of different to Northern Isles. The rest of the pool: Acropolis, Bedouins, Arabia, Arena, Fish and Fish, Ring of Reeds, and Rocky Forest. The favorite to win the tournament is obviously Hera, but this could be a unique chance for Mr. Yo to win an S-tier event on home turf, and that's quite noteworthy, I think, without jet lag. It would also be an amazing comeback story if Viper took the trophy, and, well, there's also Leary, but He will almost certainly take second place, no matter who he plays against, after cruising through the whole tournament without dropping a single game. At last, for Age of Empires 2, there is a community tournament going on, or starting soon, for all German-speaking players. In early November, the AoE II Germany 1v1 League for German-speaking players will start again. If you want to participate, you can register until October 31st. I can highly recommend it. Lots of friendly people take part, the organization is very well organized, and many games get casted as well on the AoE II Germany Twitch channel. Players of all ELO levels are welcome. The only requirement really is to set aside time for one set per week for 8 weeks and to be German speaking. Plus, if you're really good and qualify, you also need to take your time for playoffs. Each set consists of 2 games, both of which are played, so draws are possible. The top players from the group stage advance to the playoffs. There's also a detailed handbook in German, which will be updated in the next few days, and the map pool's already announced. I've included the link to the league in the episode description so you can stay up to date. Then Age of Empires 4. The big Age of Empires 4 event right now is the EGC Masters Fall with a $20,000 prize pool, which started in September and runs until October 12th. The group stage is still ongoing with no real surprises so far. I am curious to see if Louis can once again snatch an S-tier tournament away from Marine Lord. At the end of October, there's also the King of the Rockies 2025 tournament, an A-tier $15,000 LAN in Denver, USA, which takes place from October 24th until 26th and is organized by Rising Empires, the same people behind the Garrison's Age of Empires 4 LAN event. It'll be a short 3-day event. Notably, Magic will be competing after qualifying last minute. He recently switched from Age of Mythology back to Age of Empires 4, so this will be an interesting one to watch. Speaking of Age of Mythology, at the end of October, the 4th season of the Champions League will begin, running until December 7th. It's hosted by Age of Mythology veteran Boyd with a $10,000 prize pool. And that's it for this month's magazine. As I already told you, it's a little shorter than usual, just because my voice is slowly dying. But before we wrap up, still a bit of housekeeping needs to be done. If you have any questions or feedback, you can reach me in 2 ways. Either join the podcast Discord server, which you'll find the link to in the episode description or show notes, or just write me an email at ageofcast@gmail.com. And one more reminder, this podcast is still ad-free and funded only by listeners. If you enjoy the show, you can support me on Patreon. There are several support tiers to choose from, and German-speaking listeners can also support on Steady, where they can unlock German language versions of all English episodes. Depending on your Patreon or Steady tier, I'll proudly read your name here in this magazine. So let me now thank this month's especially generous patrons. Matt Kanak, Tom Lück, Yannick Schulz, Stefan Voite, Erich Miller, Lawrence Herlen, Jan Zürcher, Marek Kellner, Pathfinder, and Limbonic. Thank you very much for all your continuous support. The next magazine will appear in early November, but you'll hear from me in other podcasts before then. I hope you'll all enjoy the Masters of Hyperrandom 3 tournament and the Chinese LAN. And now I'll excuse myself and go take a shower and then go to bed. I'll see you in the next podcast.